Thank you, Sasha, and thank you everyone for joining. It's my pleasure to open up the day again with a conversation with Dr. Karp.
I'm only called Dr. Karp. Some of you guys weren't here, don't know this, but when we started, we had no revenue, we had no product, we had no investors, we were almost going out of business, and the only thing anyone believed in was that I was a doctor. That's I kept trying to get rid of it, and then I realized, we got to have something they believe in, and so that's why I'm still Dr. Karp. But you can call me any four-letter word that you can say in public.
Perfect. I'll shorten it to Karp as we go. I wanted to start by asking you about the letter that was in the news a lot this week by the Center for AI Safety that said, paraphrasing, that mitigating the risk of extinction posed by AI technology should be treated as a global priority, the same as societal level risks like pandemics or nuclear war. And as the leader of a company that supported governments and private institutions through the pandemic, has been outspoken about the risks posed by the invasion of Ukraine on nuclear activity, how do you respond to that statement?
Well, I think it's great to be here. Thank you for the light softball question. You get someone else next year. we clearly picked the wrong person. So we've been involved in building systems in the classified environment, and in the last 5-6 years, systems that are involved in identifying targets using AI. AI, in this context, meant finding targets in very large spaces. So spaces the size of Texas, find this kind of person, and then a handoff. You find target. People assume that when you find a target that you would then automatically would just disappear. But in fact, what really happens is it's very hard to find these. You need to be able to work on disparate kinds of data sets that are very large. And then there's a handoff mechanism where it's like, is the target is the identified object next to a hospital? Is it an identified object next to children? Is the identified object actually an asset of ours? Is the identified object the idiot we want to not die? There's a lot of complicated things that involve what I think is, yes, these technologies are very dangerous, but our adversaries are even more dangerous. And that we, because of that, have no choice but to run headlong. What's interesting about a lot of these statements and what's going on in AI, which is mostly focused around the large language models, is that you really have different factions. You have a faction that is saying that it's hyper dangerous because right now you need very, very specialized technology, which I believe we provide, to make large language models really, really important in your enterprise so that you're not delivering a piece of poetry to your enterprise. It's like no one has time to deliver poetry. We need margins to change, safety to be better, generally understanding of our business, the knowledge of one part of our business to be transferred to another. These are things that large language models do exceedingly well with infrastructure that we'll be showing off today, and I don't want to take away from the things that are coming, but there's a lot of things we built that will allow you to do that are very valuable. So there's one part of that faction that is saying that because they're right, and these things are very dangerous, but they're often right, but it's not also mentioning if we don't build it, our adversaries will, and that won't be very good for us when we have no rule of law. And I'm in a constant battle with my academic friends about this because they believe that in the absence of hard power, either being able to use AI now or nuclear warheads, we would have a rule of law. We at Palantir believe that you need these weapons to enforce a rule of law. And that's our deeply held belief, and we've had that for 20 years, and it's cost us a lot. It cost us investors because we wouldn't work in China or in Russia. It cost us, sometimes people didn't want to work at Palantir. But then you also have a coalition, and this is actually not related to people here, but in the defense establishment where we play a role, quite frankly, there are very few providers of software that's useful, and everyone else wants to have a debate about how dangerous they are. Let's just debate it and debate it and debate it, and we can implement these things in 5 years. It's like, and that we have to avoid. And yeah, again, my view, the view of our company is very dangerous, very valuable. One of the things I do really like about it, though, is that for commercial enterprises, it gives you the ability, if you're adaptive, to outmaneuver everyone else. And the industries that are going to do that most effectively are largely going to be in America, because American industry and its executives are just very, very pragmatic. If I can change the margins of my business, I can understand my business better, I can implement the cultural and knowledge advantages I have because I developed a way of building my business over the last 20 years better than anyone else in the world, I'm going to do it tomorrow. And that's just an enormous advantage. And that's quite frankly why this audience is packed. And I think that's just something we have to run towards, and that's what we're doing as a company.
You mentioned pragmatism and the implementation of software there, and I think maybe I started with a question around extinction because I'm a pessimistic person. If you're trained as an economist and you work as an intel officer, you spend a lot of your time thinking of how things can go wrong. I think software engineers, by and large, are optimistic people. You're going to build something that doesn't exist for the first time.
Yeah, well, they're optimists in the long term and pessimists when you tell them what they should do.
I was going to say intransigent, but yeah. And that maybe the synthesis of those two things, I think, is realism here at Palantir. And the reason I've stayed here this long is we spend a lot of our time, I think, in that synthesis of taking the optimism of that software and putting it against the pessimism of these problems in the world. Where are you most excited about that combination?
Look, our
and ambition?
software that allows you to identify adversaries at a high level, and we constantly caution not to say much except for that the Ukrainians use our software, changed the course of history demonstratively. And software that we built 20 years ago changed the course of Europe because we stopped terror attacks while protecting civil liberties. Software that we're now rolling out will change the trajectory of the U.S. economy in a very positive direction. And I'm not, there are certainly flaws in the West, but we are the best group of countries and structures that this world has ever known. And we have now technologies that will allow us to lurch forward. And we have cultural and training biases in this country that are tech-friendly, pragmatic, able to implement things, very high level of technical competence inside organizations built up over the last 5-10 years. Super a willingness to bring the best talent in the world, and that one of the things about large language models that is just really cool is that for our partners is it's like many of these things, it's horrifically unfair, but it's going to make places that are already strong, pragmatic, have specific ways of doing business that are quite valuable. It's going to allow those industries to lurch forward very, very, very quickly. And we haven't, I've been at this for 20 years, so without, like the products we built on, we built products for Intel, products for Special Forces, products on identifying adversaries, and none of them have the ability to transform a whole economy like this and put variability in the hands of very talented people, ethically, legally, safely. But the interesting thing also is that, and this is more academic, but we've been in the trenches. It's like one of these things, no one ever believed we cared about civil liberties, but we made a ton of money caring about civil liberties because you have certain architectural, from a technical perspective, civil liberties means you need a branching structure so that you can segment who sees what. You need access control so that you can verify who sees what. You need an ability to do that dynamically. You need an ability to impose what objects mean to each other, so what we call an ontology. You need ability to write against that where you only write against the segment part of your data. But now in the LLM context, you can think of that as just a way to process something that is moderately useful to very useful into something that is crazy valuable. Shyam's going to show you this in this concept, this thing we built called agents. But all that processing, all those things about like academic data protection, they're really just like taking an unrefined product, moving it into a refined product, and making it deadly. And to see that something that looked philosophical became valuable in the anti-terror context is now deadly in the AI context and can help people transform their businesses very, very quickly within the context of how a business actually runs. So you have proprietary knowledge, you have data sets, you have things that are actually regulated, you have things that you do not want to share, you have some things that you would expose to a large language model and other things you wouldn't. You have areas where the large language model needs tooling. You have areas where it doesn't need tooling. You have areas where you can accept 80% accuracy and areas where you can't. You have specialized knowledge in your business that even you find it hard to articulate. Like, why is America and Silicon Valley and just in general, this culture so good at building enterprise software? I don't know how to articulate that. But it's very, very hard to explain our selection and building products but it works. But getting that specialized, how do you manufacture something very complicated that one company manufactures very well, but another company doesn't? How do you actually take all those insights and roll them against your business while being able to drill down into those insights so that you can make sure that the decisions being made are actually ones that you would support, not just ethically, but from a business perspective? And all that comes down to things that we've built that are actually in demand and that we don't have to convince people are valuable because they are just valuable. So that is super cool.
Yeah. When you think of that transformation of the software through those gates and delivering that value, last month in Copenhagen you were giving a talk, and I think you got a question which was, is the West ahead of adversaries in technology like this? And if so, how far ahead? How big is that lead? And you mentioned in your answer that yes, they're ahead, but the issue to worry about isn't other people catching you from behind, it's Western governments not being able to move as quickly and efficiently as they can. You talked about budget appropriations and programmatic things. For this room and most of our audience today that's in the private sector, what do you think that acceleration looks like on the commercial side? And maintain.
Well, again, I think what everyone in this room is going to do and what I think people have already done, and one of the coolest things I've ever seen in the history of Palantir is you go next door where these demos are and we're showing off our product, and we have current partners showing other partners how you do this. Like, it's this thing about software that was always true is it's all BS until you try it. It's like, I was constantly asked, what makes Palantir different than these 5 other companies? I don't know. Go try all of us. It's like, it is just try. Why don't you have a payment strategy? Because I know our partners, future partners, are smart enough to pay us a lot of money if we create a lot of value. How do I know it will work? Well, we can show you it working, and we can show you how valuable it is. And what it basically means in the government context, you have this problem globally that 98% of software spend goes to people building things by hand that take 5 years and maybe then take 10 years and then they take 20 years. And beyond that, that's just not how software is built at a world-class level. You can't have security if it's not a product. It's like, well, how are you? And it's very hard to do these things, but it's definitely not going to work. So, and this is not just America. This is everywhere. And then you have a lot of places. One country doesn't want to buy from another country, and quite frankly, many of our allies have a problem that all the products come from America anyway that works. So, like, how do you explain that? In a commercial context, it's very different. It's like we have a problem. Palantir has, in the commercial context, multi-year, 10-year reputation for delivering very complicated systems that have worked across heterogeneous industries. Great. We're going to they're making some pretty bold claims. You're going to say, great, if those bold claims are true, we want to see it. And then you go and test it. And then we enter into a relationship after you've gotten value. And the only thing I would say is this is kind of obvious, but where it's not obvious, we as a culture have to make it even more obvious, because on paper, AI sounds like it's very hard to know what will be valuable, and enterprises have very complicated internal technical challenges that are now being exposed. So one of the very advantageous things for us is AI will pen test your whole enterprise. So you can use our products, but the stronger your enterprise, the more value you're going to get. So that's like, so you're going to see this try it, get value, and then the next question is, well, how do I get even more value? And that's just a process that it's not theoretical. It just has to be tried and proven. Maybe we should go to questions.
Yeah, I was going to say let's take some questions from the room.
Or we could just talk about...
Extinction.
There's always one person who has like 5 questions, so that person should ask one. Oh, we have our long-term advocate here. Friend, ask a question. Yeah, you. I don't know. Want to ask a question? Okay.
I'll ask one more while we... Okay, it worked.
I will ask one. I didn't know you were looking directly at me, putting me on the spot. I'm representing one of these, but there's historically places in the world that have not had similar values, right, to the West or to the United States, and sometimes they're aligned, sometimes they're less aligned, right? And bringing something that delivers this kind of power and this kind of insight and efficacy into those markets, right? How does Palantir look like, or how does Palantir look at that in terms of, like you're saying, bringing some of these Western values and the benefits that the way we think in the West give us this kind of advantage? How do you look at bringing some other places that might necessarily not always align with us, bringing those kinds of capabilities to bear to actually help us in the long term deliver the values that we really want everyone to share?
Well, it's interesting. I've been asked this question a lot, and but I have I don't actually know the real answer now, because when you see what we're building with these agents, it's really scary. So it raises the threshold of where so the agent basically, Sean will show you this, but it takes the output of an LLM, creates it in a hybrid algorithm, and allows you to run it passively, meaning all the time, against your whole enterprise, and depending on the quality of your security, you can segment, but it's still, you can see how that could be easily abused. And I do wonder if that should be sold to like local law enforcement. And so I don't know. In the past, we've always been like, I'm in no way a neocon, honestly. I just think we have the West, we have the core West, and we have allies, and we have customers all over the globe, and if they're on our side, I think we should cut them slack, and if they're not, but slack doesn't mean everywhere, and we used to have these ongoing discussions, and we've refused to work with lots of people, and it's cost us huge money, and I've been yelled at, and quite frankly, if I was fireable, I would have been fired many times over this. And I still am, everyone's fireable, but it's a little harder because the alternative to me is an engineer. And nobody, everyone's afraid, even with our products, we'll have no revenue. So it's really hard. Like, wait till you see Shyam's demo. It's like that. I'm sure we should sell this to U.S. industry. I'm sure we should encourage clandestine service, special operators, current clients, the U.S. military, the Five Eyes. I'm sure we should give it to them. I think we're going to have long discussions about where else, because, it's like you don't want to have something that could, we've been in the business actually of protecting everyone's right to their own liberty, which also means your own lifestyle, your own secrets, your own personal proclivities that are yours, your health records, and I think that's one of the things that makes our society so special. So there's a lot of new thought that's going to have to go on about this. But in the near term, if you're U.S. industry in Europe, clandestine services in the West, we'll definitely sell it to you, and we'll have to think hard about everyone else.
Other questions from the room? Yep, one right here in the front.
There's no shortage of problems in healthcare, and now that you're kind of getting under the hood in healthcare, how do you see Foundry transforming that whole industry across the different hospitals, across the whole spectrum?
Well, thanks to the great work of two people are here and others, where we power, I think, 13% of hospital beds in the U.S. Those use cases are super intricate. If you just look at Foundry, the use cases are optimization. How do you take scarce resources and disperse them in the most financially beneficial but also ethical way? You have 1 million hospital beds, and you have 1.5 million patients. Who gets them under what conditions? That's both economic and philosophical, moral implications and legal implications that you can deal with in Foundry. You also, in the hospital industry, and this is before you begin to integrate AI, you have highly trained workers, nurses, doctors, that need to be involved in the judgment chain. And so how do you do that and then do it systematically is a classic Foundry problem. I think you're also going to see that given the way we can manage data in a completely transparent way and show the transforms, meaning how the data is joined in a transparent way, that industry is going to be ideal for Palantir and AI, simply because certain optimization and knowledge-based transfer issues, so not everything a nurse understands or a doctor understands should be transferable to an AI, but some precursor decisions that can be evaluated should be, just in the same way in other contexts you identify and then have a handover to a human. But that can only be done under the condition that you can actually see how that was done, even simply for legal, ethical, and reputational reasons. And you also have, the other reason why software is so important in that industry is it's margin challenged. So if you have a margin challenged, meaning the industry, or a resource challenged industry, that is with complicated engineering and societal variables, that is something you need software for. And that's why our software has been so impactful during the COVID epidemic, why it's I mean, we barely had software sales into the hospital industry a year ago. It's just going like that. But it's going to, you will see where you begin to integrate. It's going to be very hard for other people to get in. Our product's ideally suited for that plus AI, because just purely, one of the big concerns in the hospital is litigation. So it's like, I brought this patient in. Okay, great. Well, you're going to get sued either way, but like you need to be able to show, well, this is exactly how the decision was made based on these data sets. That requires a branching architecture, ACLs, an ability to do this transparently, ability to show how the data was organized, meaning the transforms. And then if you're running AI on top of it, you're going to have to be able to unpack that in court, which we do natively. And then one of the valuable things for us, besides helping hospitals, which is incredibly valuable and gratifying, and my father's a doctor, so finally might get some respect at home, is that it is a much more intricate, difficult use case than people realize outside that industry, and it highlights where a product works and where it works and where it doesn't. So we also have a vested interest, because we can show off, okay, these are the very complicated issues that, by the way, you're also going to have if you're building an engine or drilling for oil and gas, or if you're doing pharmaceuticals, or if you are organizing, building water plants, or if you are doing really anything that involves the convergence of complicated engineering and regulation, which is basically every industry in this country. But this one particularly highlights it, partly because of the challenges on the resources, and partly because of ongoing litigation challenges. Oh.
We'll just repeat the question for everyone else.
First of all, try not to embarrass Ganesh, who's our representative. In your perspective, which is the biggest deciding person in the C-suite to deploy Palantir's technology? The CFO, the Chief Innovation Officer, the Chief Digital Officer, the Chief Technology Officer? Who is the belly button that really pushes you guys across the line inside a culture that's not ready for that?
Just to repeat the question for those listening to the stream, the question was, putting aside the remark about Ganesh, a colleague of ours, who's the main person in the C-suite that you think is the
Well, no, I think the part of it is like, say there's resistance in the org. But the real answer is it just depends on the org. You know, we have partners here where the CEO wants to get involved in that, in technical decisions. We have partners. We just need somebody who has the authority, if they see value, to push quickly. And so in some orgs, that's the CFO, actually, surprise. In some orgs, that's the CEO. Usually it honestly ends up being a coalition of like somebody who's got credibility. By the way, sometimes it's not in the C-suite. I mean, I see this all the time. We got our company off the ground because special operators went to the generals and said, yeah, you may not like that guy, but he's bringing us home safely. And the generals were like, yeah, I don't like that guy, but if you bring him home safely, I will buy your software. So, and that's a classic Palantir. The AI thing has just shifted this, though. It's like a year ago, the answer would have been, 2 years ago, it would have been CEO or it doesn't work. A year ago, it's like mostly CEO. Last time we did this conference, I guess it was a couple months ago, would have been like 70-30. Now, we have just a lot of very technical people in the technical part of organizations saying, okay, I'm going to do this. I have these 5 highly technical questions, which are largely, you know, you'll see it being answered, but come down to, you know, safety, security, understanding the limits of LLMs, understanding where they have to be augmented, those kind of questions. And if you can answer those questions and more importantly show it, they're off to the races. So it really, really depends. And it also depends geography to geography. One of the things that's made America very successful for us is more people can make these decisions. So when we're in Europe, it really has had to come from the C-suite, and then we've had a lot of resistance. Then you also see, even in government, there's huge differences. Special operations works different than intel, which works different than military. And in some of these cases, it's very disparate. You can work with one part, and the other part you can't work with. But again, you know, we constantly get asked by experts, meaning, I probably shouldn't say this, but I could have built a business, I should have built a business, I could have gone to a hedge fund, but now I am an expert on software analysis and I rate the software products and decide how valuable they are for Wall Street, right? And they always want to know how big is the TAM. And it's actually quite hard to calculate it for us, but one of the things that has made the TAM much bigger in the US is more people can decide to say yes, much more. And in the AI context, it's really, since we're on the frontier, and everyone knows we're on the frontier, it's, one of the really cool things is it's the first time I've seen a market, maybe since we built our Intel product, where everybody knows we're on the frontier, and therefore it's like, okay, there's no playbook. This really helps us, because when there's a playbook, maybe we disagree with the playbook, which we often do. Like software needs to do these 4 things to fit into our architecture, or we're not going to buy it. Right? So that's really slowed Foundry growth down, because we actually have a different view. Our view is that it should be category defining, meaning you should be able to answer these questions independent of what an expert says software should be like. Because someday you are going to have to ask and answer and write to your enterprise under difficult conditions, questions that you're not asking and answering tomorrow. And you're going to have to be able to do it in a way that's not just data science, but is algorithmic. We've always thought that. But that was, we lost a lot of those battles. And even though Foundry grew 67% last year, in a world that was more frontier, probably would have grown 3x of that. And so now in the AI context, there really is no playbook of how it should look. People just want it to work. And that's again, one of the main reasons we've had more inbound for Palantir in the last couple of weeks than we had all last year. And it's precisely because the playbook is out the door. Everyone knows this could be very valuable if implemented correctly. Everyone knows if it's not implemented correctly, you're going to get some poetry, and it's going to be expensive, or it could, yeah. So that's very different.
Great. Thank you all for the questions. I think this is a great introduction of what we're talking about here and what that frontier will look like. Any other closing remarks?
Thank you for
from
coming. For those of you new to Palantir, you've picked a great time to come. We've never had a vibe this good. It's been pretty good in the past, but it's not like this. So, I hope you enjoy being here as much as I enjoy having you here, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks.